We're getting through it. We're getting through it. This whole thing has been a much bigger project than I ever imagined it could be, and I have to say, I have even more and renewed respect in people who do these types of projects that do film. It's not easy, and I'm getting older, so it's the tech stuff that I'm having trouble with. Thank God, thank Manos for my daughter-in-law. So we're on chapter 12, but first, I found a few things that I want to share. Um, Manos is known, as you know, as the worst movie ever made. And of course, that's debatable. There's a lot of terrible films out there. But I found these, and they are awards that my dad got for Best Actor Awards at the Festival Theater, which is the theater where this whole thing, the whole Manos thing, actually began and came together because John Reynolds and William Bryan Jennings, who played the sheriff, and Hal Warren, and my dad were all in the same play together. Henry IV, my dad playing the lead role, and that's where Hal looked around and saw all these castmates and thought, "Ooh, here's the people for the movie I want to make." Anyhow, in that same year, boy, my eyes are getting bad. Yeah, 1966, 1967. This is the Festival Theater Harlequin Award, Best Actor Award for the year. And that's the same year Manos was made, 1966. And then he also got this one for the following year, 1967, 68. So there. Anyway, let's get going. Chapter 12. I've got about maybe 6 episodes left, and we'll be done with this book. And then I hope you stick around because I've got some other things planned, but I got to get through this first. Okay, let's go. Chapter 12. Aftermanos. Unlike the assertion in the Hotel Torgo documentary that the entire cast and crew of Manos was dead or mysteriously disappeared, plenty of us are still alive and well, thanks. Of course, given that the film is now 50 years old, there's a kernel of truth to the claim. Many of the key players have passed on, and a few are even mysteriously missing in action. A big part of researching this book involved finding out what happened to the cast and crew and attempting to contact those who are still around to talk about their experiences during and after Manos. Along the way, I've made some wonderful new friends and learned much more about the world of Manos than I ever could have done if I hadn't embarked on this journey. During this time, I've noticed a certain synchronicity and interconnectedness in my search for Manos survivors. Seemingly dead-end research paths sometimes inadvertently turned up a source I didn't know I'd been looking for. And if one contact wasn't able to help me with information, he or she frequently knew of someone who could. After a while, I wasn't even surprised anymore and simply accepted the elimination of any roadblocks as manifestation of the will of Manos. And here is how the hands of fate have dealt with those people who were involved in the making of a B movie so many years ago. Hal Warren. After Manos, Hal gave his next movie, Wild Desert Bikers, a pitch in El Paso, and even had his oldest son, Chipper, build a badass motorcycle for it. He approached Bob Guthrie to once again offer the opportunity at cinematic accolades, but Bob wisely declined. Hal apparently couldn't drum up enough support elsewhere either, so he reluctantly put his movie-making plans aside. However, he continued to dream and he continued to write. Hal stayed involved in the Festival Theater and won Best Supporting Actor in 1968 as the comedic Victor in Barefoot in the Park. In 1969, after being in El Paso for only 5 years, Hal moved his family to Arizona, where his son Joe, was 3 and his daughter Wendy was 1.5. He became director of customer relations for the town of Arizona City. He and Norma got their real estate licenses, and Norma began selling real estate. Pepe was unable to make the trip based on a previous poor decision to bite baby Joe on the face, so he'd already traveled to the great happy hunting grounds where dogs go after this life. In 1972, Hal wrote a book titled Computerized Salesmanship, The New Last Frontier, published by Vantage Books. Here, he summarized his persuasive technique as programming your prospective customer to his particular needs and wants by transfer of wants and ideas, your brain, to another, his brain, in such a way that you both extract the same meaning from them. In 1974, Hal and his family moved briefly to Denver, where they lived for 2 years. He and Norma worked in real estate, selling subdivided lots. After returning to the Phoenix area in 1976, Hal and Norma established their own company, Creative Marketing Consultants Limited, with Norma as officer and sole shareholder. The company specialized in selling interest in tax shelters promoted by William A. Kilpatrick, including coal and methane shelters. Hal was fond of saying that luck was the place where opportunity and preparation meet. And he had quite a bit of luck for a while selling these shelters and receiving 40% commissions. Kilpatrick went on to become famous as the plaintiff in what has been described as the largest tax fraud case in the U.S. USA versus William A. Kilpatrick. The case was dismissed in 1984, and Hal's luck held as he ended his business with Kilpatrick before coming under IRS scrutiny. As licensed real estate agents, Hal and Norma may have found a new opportunity, according to Hal's daughter, Shelley Connor. She believes they were involved in selling many acres of land in a development called Lake Havasu Estates, which was in the middle of the desert, 40 miles from Lake Havasu. The development had no utilities and no buildings. It was mostly marketed to out-of-state buyers, sight unseen. Referred to as a land fraud deal, it was a no-fail plan for Hal. If the purported owner of the property failed to keep up the mortgage payments, the mortgagee would get the property back. It was a bit unscrupulous, but legal, according to Shelley. The area, now known as Area 66 in Yucca, Arizona, has a following of sorts, with its golf ball-shaped geodesic dome on stilts called the Dinosphere, originally built as an attraction for the Lake Havasu Estates subdivision. The other draw is the ghost town across the road. The people who chose to live there now seem very happy living off the grid by trucking in water and using solar and wind energy. Was Hal an operator or just a really great salesman? Is there a whole lot of difference between the two? Throughout his life, he seemed to confidently journey through potentially questionable dealings with just enough momentum, intuition, and foresight to repeatedly emerge unscathed. His eternal optimism prepared him as he set sights on the next thing. In the end, Hal may have left this world without paying the piper, but some of his misdeeds in the eyes of the law caught up posthumously when the IRS audited his tax records in 1995 and sued Norma for more than $60,000 in underreported income. Hal succumbed to lung cancer on December 26, 1985, and Norma was left to face the court. She emerged relatively unscathed when the case against her husband was dismissed due to her purported ignorance of his business dealings. Bob Guthrie. Bob Guthrie had little hope of benefiting from Manos even months before the unfortunate premiere. On a sliver of a prayer, he would have invested any windfall from Manos into his dream of forming his own film company, according to period correspondence between Bob and lifelong pal Bernie Rosenblum. Hal had already approached him about his next film venture, but Bob was already courting a county project with another group of local filmmakers for a promotional documentary on El Paso as the possible gateway to the Mexico City Olympics. The grant didn't happen and the project never materialized. He still had his day job as a sportscaster and news director for KROD, but left a couple of years later for a new career in public relations for a number of companies, including William Beaumont Hospital and the El Paso Airport. Bob actually did make some money in film at one point. He was the newscaster on a television in the background on the film The Getaway with Ali MacGraw and Steve McQueen, filmed in El Paso in 1972. It was about a 10-second shot, and he received an annual royalty check for years in the amount of around $7, according to his youngest son, Jeremy Guthrie. Bob and Bernie continued their regular weekly poker games, and Bernie was like an uncle to the Guthrie kids. Bob was known throughout his life as a very funny, quick-witted guy, always ready with a quip. Jeremy describes him as a charming, lecherous scoundrel who unabashedly courted the ladies throughout his first 2 marriages. After his first daughter from his second marriage to Pat was born, he acknowledged his behavior. Jeremy quotes him as saying, "Seeing this little girl moves me to want to protect her from the rest of the men like me." Even so, he continued his roaming ways. He met his third wife, Marty, at the ad agency where they both worked and began dating her the day after Pat had kicked him out for the last time. He had quietly admired her but felt the beautiful woman 15 years his junior was out of his league. He learned differently when he showed up at home the morning after a night with yet another woman. Pat greeted him at the door with, "I know where you've been, and I know what you've been doing and who you were with." He answered, "And what would that be?" She proceeded to tell him how she noticed how he and Marty had been looking at each other at office functions. A light bulb went off in his head. Marty liked him? He went to work the next day and asked her out to lunch. They married against the wishes of Marty's brothers, had 2 children of their own, and Bob adored her for the remainder of his days. After Marty came along, Bob completely changed his ways, including giving up drinking, while retaining the lively, spirited essence of who he was. Bob Guthrie passed away November 1, 2003 in Austin, Texas, of lung cancer, just 1 year after Marty. Before his death, he told longtime poker pal Bernie Rosenblum that he wished to be cremated and wanted all his children to be together afterward. 3 kids from his second marriage and 2 from his third. He instructed Bernie to bring a bottle of his favorite scotch, obtainable only from Mexico, giving his buddy one last posthumous dig. Bob wanted his 5 children to finish the scotch together and then put his ashes in the empty bottle. Unfortunately, Bernie got to Austin realizing he'd left the scotch in El Paso. In tribute to their longtime buddy, the El Paso poker games continued. The guys drank the scotch, toasting to Bob, and kept an empty seat for him from then on. Bernie Rosenblum. The other half of the Bob and Bernie show, Bernie Rosenblum, left El Paso for a time to attend Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff as a senior in 1967. He was noted for designing the intricate lighting effects for the Arizona Playmakers production of Barefoot in the Park. After graduating, he returned to El Paso, where he opened and ran a successful photography studio for many years. In 2004, he appeared in the first Manos documentary, Hotel Torgo, the only original Manos actor or crew the filmmakers managed to find because he still lived in El Paso and had his business name on the door of his downtown photography studio. It's especially great now to have his words immortalized in Hotel Torgo, since he never had the opportunity for another in-depth interview before suffering a stroke in 2010. He was still able to chat with me on the phone for a little while around Christmas time, 2014. Before handing over the phone, his wife told me he wasn't doing well and that I shouldn't expect much from our conversation. But once Bernie was on the phone, he got so excited he didn't want to hang up. He recounted the fun he had doing the film and was happy to see the notoriety it was getting. He was glad to talk to me and happy to hear that Dad was doing all right. By then, I was hearing Kay yelling out of concern for the third time in the background for him to get off the phone, which made me chuckle at how she'd underestimated his stamina when it comes to Manos. I'm glad he got to experience some of the Manos fame before his final stroke and death in April 2015. After Bernie's death, Kay chose to spread some of his ashes in all the places he had lived, and that had meaning in his life. She obtained a bit of Bob Guthrie's ashes and took a bit of Bernie. I'm going to cry again. It's been a long time since I've read this. Whew. She obtained a bit of Bob Guthrie's ashes and took a bit of Bernie and drove out to the set location where the columns and the master's bed still stand. There, she sprinkled the ashes around, reuniting the two friends who had been so inseparable in life. Ugh. I'm an emotional person. So, I want to finish on a happy note here. I found these two. You have to see this. Maybe I showed it in another earlier episode. I don't remember. But, oops, can you see that? Without so much glare. This is the master at 2 years old on the beach in Brownsville, Texas. Look at him holding his little hands out in the pose already. Isn't that cute? He was destined. And there he is thinking about his future in film. I think he's about, a year old? I don't know. But there he is. Anyhow, that was, yeah. Gosh, I got another half to chapter 12. That's next. I'm really going to try and just get these all done so that we can put them out more quickly. I'm sorry for the delay in between. Those of you who have waited to watch this and listen to this until I have a number of episodes already posted, then you can watch it as fast as you want. But we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.